Hey friends, Mrs. Keen here. We're going to go through and do these plot notes together. So hopefully you've already put this document into Notability. So let's go ahead and just start from the top. So we're talking about elements of plot. Okay, so the definition of plot is the sequence. Oh, okay, that's not right. So sorry about that. The sequence of events that make up a fictional story. So when we talk about plot, we're only talking about fiction. So made up stories, no matter what genre of fiction that you're in. When we're talking about plot, it's important for us to remember that setting is going to be key. So setting is always going to be the time and place of a story. It's also going to be important that we understand point of view. So hopefully this is not anything new, but we have 3 different types we're going to focus on in 6th grade. The first one is first person point of view. This is when a character in this story tells the story. Typically we use those pronouns of I, me, or my. Third person limited is when a narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of just one character in a story. And we use those pronouns of he, she, and they. Sorry, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. And then the last one is third person omniscient. The narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of all characters in a fictional story, and it uses the pronouns he, she, and they. Think of omniscient as all-knowing, okay? So those are the 3 point of views we're going to focus on. If at any time I'm moving too fast, remember that you can pause, write down your notes, and then restart my video where you need it. Okay? So you might have seen this before. This is what we call a plot map or maybe a plot diagram. So we're going to fill in the boxes real quick. So whenever we do a plot map, we always need the title and author of the story. That's going to be really important that we always have the title and the author. So again, when we're talking about plot, we're talking about fiction. So whenever we read a story, we always want to be able to pick out the pieces of a plot map. So the first piece is right here. The first piece is called the exposition. Okay? Inside the exposition, we're always going to need setting, point of view, and we're going to need the main characters. So the exposition typically happens in the very beginning of the story, and that's where we're introduced to the setting, the point of view, and those main characters. So after we finish learning about our exposition, the second thing that we're going to learn about is our inciting incident. Okay? This is where we learn the conflict type. So typically early on in the story, we learn what the overall conflict or problem is and the inciting incident. After the inciting incident, we go to the rising action. And the reason why you have a jaggedy edge right here in the rising action is because the character is going to come across some bumps along the way. After our rising action, we then move to our climax or turning point. After we get to our climax, we then go to the falling action. And then we're going to end our story with the resolution. Okay? So those are the 6 different pieces of the plot diagram. It's important to note something, and I'm going to say this, and you're probably going to hear this over and over again. So when we're talking about plot, we are going in sequential order. So we're going to always do things in order from the beginning, from the exposition, moving forward to the inciting incident, hitting those speed bumps in the rising action. We get to the climax. Then still in sequential order, we're going down and talking about the falling action. And then we're going to end with a resolution. So remember that all events will go in order from beginning to last. Another word for that is sequential order. That's just really important for you to remember. Putting events in order is going to be key in order for you guys to understand plot. Okay? So now we have all of the elements. The elements are exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. We're going to move on to the second part of our notes. So the second part of our notes are to go into a deeper dive of what all of these elements are for plots, okay? So we're going to take one element at a time. So we're going to start with the exposition. Okay, so this is the first part of plot. Remember our setting, our characters. Oh, I spelled character wrong. So sorry. I need to start that again. So our setting, our characters, and the point of view are introduced, okay? And to review from the first part, setting is time and place. You're in 6th grade now, you should be able to do both. And point of view will either be, I'm going to say first, or I'm going to say third L for third limited, or third omniscient. I'm say third O for omniscient. Okay. All right, moving on to the inciting incident. This is where the main problem or conflict happens in a story. Okay, so the main problem or conflict. I apologize. I am like not paying attention. Let me just write the word. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Y'all, I did it again. I am so sorry. What is wrong with me today? Okay, so the main problem or conflict happens in a story. So when we're talking about the inciting incident, typically the question that we're going to ask you is, what gets in the way of what the protagonist wants? So in the beginning of the story, the protagonist is going to want something. So what gets in the way of that? And if you don't remember what a protagonist is, the protagonist is the main character in a story. So sometimes we're taught that a protagonist is a good guy and the antagonist is a bad guy. That's not the truth. The protagonist is just the main character in a story. Okay? So from there, we move from the inciting incident to our rising action. So after we figure out what the problem is, we are then going to see what steps the protagonist takes as they attempt to solve the problem or the conflict. So this is when the protagonist will encounter several setbacks. That's why it was a little bit squiggly on the front on our plot map. And the rising action is often the longest part of a story because the character is often going to come across some setbacks to keep them from solving their problem or getting what they want. Okay? So, rising action, we've done. So then we come across the climax. So we've made it through our setbacks. We've made it through the longest part of our story. Now we've hit the climax. And this is when the main character comes face to face with their problem. It can also be called the turning point of a story because the character will most likely turn the corner of something. They'll change in some way. They will face their problem head on, and it turns on, it moves on. So usually the climax is the most intense or exciting part of the story. And this is usually where the protagonist could change in some way. Maybe they come up to an epic battle and they change for the good. They change for the bad. So this typically happens in the climax. So from there, we move to the falling action. And these are all the events that come after the climax, but before the ending. All of our conflicts, all of our hiccups in our story begin moving toward a resolution. The falling action is typically pretty short when it comes to a fictional story. And then we have our resolution. This is the very end of the story. And all conflicts are now going to be resolved. So if this was a perfect Disney movie, the resolution would be everybody lived happily ever after. And of course, not all stories end that way, but that's kind of how I like to think about the resolution. It's the very, very, very end of the story. Happily ever after. That would be it. Okay, so these are your plot notes. If you miss something, feel free to stop, rewind, and listen again. These are going to be crucial over the next few weeks as we get into our short stories and then we start reading The Honest Truth. So make sure you have these and you do not lose them and they are filed away somewhere safe. Thanks for watching, guys.